Wait first. What if the madman where everybody dey stone na billionaire? This story go change the way you see people forever.
The entire market held its breath as the billionaire dropped to his knees in the dirty sand. He didn't look at the wealthy plaza owners bowing before him. He only looked at Esther, a girl who smelled of cheap firewood and onions, and gently kissed her ash-stained hands. The wealthy merchants watched in absolute horror as the man removed his designer sunglasses. Underneath the clean shave and the expensive cologne was the exact same face of the filthy, ragged madman they had beaten and stoned with pure cruelty just 3 days prior. My people, the universe loves to hide its greatest test in the most repulsive wrapping paper. The merchants of the market thought they were chasing away a worthless nuisance who was bad for their business. They did not know they were throwing stones at the landlord of their own destinies. Sit down, turn off your lights, and listen carefully. Because this is the story of a madness that was only a mirror. In the concrete jungle of the city, survival demanded a hard heart. Esther was 23, drowning under the weight of the hospital debts her late mother had left behind. She sold cheap rice to mechanics and laborers just to keep her landlord from throwing her belongings into the street. But Esther carried a fatal flaw for a businesswoman. She remembered what it felt like to be invisible. Her corner of the street was constantly under threat from Madam Beatrice, the ruthless owner of the luxury plaza behind Esther's store. Beatrice wasn't born into wealth, she had clawed her way out of the slums, and she hated the poor because their presence reminded her of the dirt she had spent 40 years trying to scrub off her own skin. The true conflict, however, centered around a man the street called Ozo. Ozo was a towering figure covered in years of filth, wearing rags made of old sacks, his hair matted with mud. The other traders treated him like a diseased dog. Yet, there was something strange about him. He didn't rant wildly. He would arrange the small pebbles around his sitting spot into perfectly symmetrical lines, like a man used to analyzing complex data. When he looked at the electronic stock market ticker on Beatrice's plaza, his eyes tracked the numbers with silent, sharp focus. Every single afternoon, Esther would call him over to her broken umbrella. Even on days when she hadn't sold enough to pay her daily market levy, Esther would carefully dish out a clean plate of hot rice. She never threw it at him. She handed it to him respectfully, watching him wipe the rim of the plastic plate before eating, a ghostly habit of a man used to fine dining. She would sit beside him in silence, finding a strange peace in the company of someone who expected absolutely nothing from her. Beatrice's patience finally snapped on the eve of a major visit from foreign investors. Wanting the street sanitized, she paid a group of local thugs to clear Esther's stand by force. The thugs marched over, kicked Esther's cooler into the gutter, and laughed as she fell into the mud, weeping over her ruined food. As a thug raised a heavy stick to strike Esther, Ozo stopped eating. He stood up to his full, towering height. He didn't shout. He simply stepped in front of Esther and locked eyes with the attacker. The chaotic madness in his gaze vanished, replaced by an expression of terrifying, cold, absolute authority. The thug froze, his hand trembling under the weight of a gaze that felt like looking at a king. Ozo pointed a single, dirt-caked finger at the massive glass awning above Beatrice's balcony. A sudden, violent gust of wind whipped through the market, and the heavy metal bolts of the awning snapped, sending a massive pane of structural glass crashing down just inches from where Beatrice stood, plunging the street into a horrifying, breathless silence. A warning from the universe is often mistaken for bad luck by an arrogant mind. Beatrice blamed the shattered glass on faulty engineering and doubled down on her cruelty. Using her influence with the market union, she imposed a massive, illegal, cleanliness tax exclusively on Esther. The ultimatum was brutal: pay the impossible sum by tomorrow evening, or be permanently banned from the district. Esther was completely broken. Her rent was due, her capital was in the gutter, and she was reduced to selling from a plastic basin. When Ozo shuffled over to her that afternoon, holding his empty, dirty bowl, Esther faced an agonizing choice. She had exactly one portion of food left. If she ate it, she would have the strength to walk to the industrial district and beg for a cleaning job. If she gave it away, she would go to bed starving and homeless. Esther looked at the madman. She wiped her tears, scooped the last portion of rice, and placed a piece of meat on top. She handed it to him, her hands shaking. "Eat, my friend," she whispered, her voice cracking. Asterisk, "I don't think I will be here tomorrow. But you must survive." Asterisk. Ozo ate the food slowly. When he finished, he did not walk away. He reached deep into the rags wrapped around his waist and pulled out a heavy, dirt-caked metal coin with intricate, ancient engravings. He placed it in Esther's palm, closed her fingers around it, and gave her a nod that held the weight of 1,000 unspoken promises. Beatrice, who had been watching from her newly repaired balcony, saw the exchange through her binoculars. Her greedy eyes locked onto the dull shine of the metal, recognizing the distinct weight and color of solid, high-grade platinum. Assuming the madman had looted a wealthy grave or found a stolen artifact, Beatrice sent her head security guard that night to break into Esther's shack and steal the coin from her bag. The guard succeeded, bringing the heavy coin into Beatrice's office. But as Beatrice wiped the dirt off the metal under her desk lamp, her breath hitched. The engravings weren't ancient. It was a custom-cast master vault key, stamped with the unmistakable golden crest of the Ozoemena Empire, the multi-billion-dollar real estate conglomerate that owned half the city. My people, stolen items carry the spirit of their true owner. The coin on Beatrice's desk was not a blessing of wealth, it was a psychological anchor that began to drown her. Over the next 48 hours, a rotten paranoia consumed Beatrice. She knew the rumors. The founder of the Ozoemena Empire had vanished 2 years ago after a suspected poisoning by business rivals. If the madman outside her plaza possessed the master vault key, it meant one of two things: either he had killed the billionaire, or he was the billionaire. And she had spent 2 years pouring hot water on him. Beatrice's mind twisted into dark logic. Terrified that the billionaire's private army would soon descend on the market to reclaim him and punish his tormentors, she decided to destroy the evidence. She ordered municipal bulldozers to arrive at the market at noon, determined to crush Esther's remaining property, drive the madman into the forest, and pave over the corner so the Ozoemena family would find nothing but concrete. Esther knew nothing of the coin, the billionaire, or the fear eating Beatrice alive. She only knew that her grace period was over. She stood at the edge of the market, holding her small bag, watching the massive yellow bulldozers roll down the street, feeling a profound, crushing defeat. She had sacrificed her last meal to hold on to her humanity, and the world was swallowing her whole. The bulldozers roared toward Esther's corner, directed by a frantic, sweating Beatrice who was screaming at the drivers to crush the food basins. Esther closed her eyes, preparing to walk away from her life. But the crushing blow never came. The bulldozer engine suddenly choked and died. A massive, deafening siren shook the entire district. The crowd parted in shock as a fleet of 6 heavily armored, pitch-black SUVs sped into the market, swerving aggressively to block the bulldozers, trapping Beatrice and her men in a ring of polished steel. The reversal of destiny is a terrible sight for those who have built their thrones on arrogance. As the towering man stepped out of the vehicle, a collective gasp ripped through the market. The dirt, the ash, and the madness were gone, but the sharp, calculating eyes were exactly the same. This was not a ghost. This was Chief Ozoemena. 2 years ago, a neurotoxin slipped into his drink by a rival had fractured his memory and stripped his mind, leaving him wandering the streets. The condition required a specific, complex medical trigger to reverse the sudden surge of deep emotional resonance to shock the brain's pathways back into alignment. For 2 years, the city had starved him and beaten him, keeping his mind trapped in trauma. Only Esther's unyielding patience, and the profound, selfless sacrifice of her giving him her very last meal while she was starving, provided the emotional shock that broke the mental fog. He had walked away that night, found his way to a police precinct, and his empire had come to claim him. Chief Ozoemena walked past the kneeling plaza owners and stopped in front of Esther. He knelt in the dirt, took her rough, ash-stained hands, and thanked her for keeping his soul alive when the world left him to die. Then, he stood up and turned his terrible, cold gaze toward Beatrice. Beatrice was shaking on the ground, weeping hysterically, begging for mercy. Chief Ozoemena did not yell. His voice was deathly quiet, echoing across the silent market. Asterisk, you hated the dirt on my skin, Beatrice, because you are terrified of what you used to be. You stole my vault key from the only clean hands in this city. Asterisk. He snapped his fingers. His head of security stepped forward and handed him a heavy leather folder. The billionaire looked down at the shivering woman. Asterisk, your plaza was built on a land lease owned by my holding company. As of this morning, your lease is terminated for gross violation of union ethics. Your assets are ceased to pay for the assault on this young woman, and the deed to this entire commercial district has just been transferred. Asterisk, he handed the leather folder to a stunned Esther. Madam Beatrice lost her wealth and her plaza in a single afternoon. She was reduced to starting over at the very bottom, forced to face the poverty she had spent her whole life running from. But Esther did not rule with the cruelty she had been shown. She transformed the massive luxury plaza into a thriving center for small traders, building a permanent culinary school and free kitchen that fed the homeless every single day, funded entirely by the Ozoemena Foundation. My people, the angels of our destiny rarely arrive in golden chariots. They usually come wearing the rags of the people we are tested to help. How many of us judge a person's value by the dirt on their clothes or the size of their bank account? We look down on the broken, the wandering, and the poor, forgetting that the universe is constantly watching how we treat those who can do absolutely nothing for us in return. Do not let the wickedness of the city turn your heart to stone. Keep your compassion alive, even when your own pockets are empty. Because the true measure of a king is not the crown on his head, but the beggar he chooses to pull out of the dust. See you in the next one. Bye for now.